I am Sir Edward P. Cruz, your teacher broadcaster for Grade 8 English, and for this 25 minutes episode. A great afternoon to all our listeners and viewers out there, especially to our Grade 8 learners. Today is March 2, 2021, Tuesday. How have you been doing lately, students? I know you really miss going to school, chatting with your friends and classmates, greeting your teachers personally, and of course, learning in your best way. Don't worry, my dear students, for this hour, we will make your time a fruitful one. So please stay tuned and be with me all throughout these 25 minutes episodes. Before we start to unfold our lesson, I want you to prepare your materials, your pen and paper along with your learning modules so that you can take down important notes. To begin with, try to accomplish this initial activity that I am about to give. Don't worry, students. This is just a guessing activity. If you get the right answer, very good. If not, it's still very good. Why? Because this activity's purpose is just to help you link to the concepts and give ideas that you need to understand to our discussion later on. Are you ready? Okay, let's do this. For activities directions, choose the biases that match the subject. To our listeners, write your answer in your answer sheet, and to our viewers via Facebook, you can comment your answer in our chat box. Number 1. Kapampangans are known to be the most religious people in the country. Here are the choices. A. Most religious. B. Kapampangans. C. People. D. Country. I repeat. Kapampangans are known to be the most religious people in the country. A. Most religious. B. Kapampangans. C. People. D. Country. What is your answer, students? Very good. The answer is letter A. Most religious. You can see that on our screen. Next, number 2. A prepaid card is definitely better than a postpaid SIM card. Here are the choices. A. Prepaid. B. Better. C. Than. D. SIM. Again, for number 2, a prepaid card is definitely better than a postpaid SIM card. A. Prepaid. B. Better. C. Than. D. SIM. What is the answer? Good job. The answer is letter B. Better. Now let's proceed to number 3. Modular learning is the most appropriate learning modality in the new normal education. Here are the choices. Letter A. Delivery. B. Modular learning. C. Most appropriate. D. New normal. Again, modular learning is the most appropriate learning modality in the new normal education. Letter A. Delivery. B. Modular learning. C. Most appropriate. D. New normal. What is your answer? That's right. The answer is letter C, most appropriate. Moving on to number 4. Eating fruits is the only way to live healthy. Here are the choices. Letter A, only way. B, fruits. C, healthy. D, eating. Again, eating fruits is the only way to live healthy. Letter A, only way. B, fruits. C, healthy. D, eating. What is the answer? The answer is letter A, only way. That's great. And now, the last but not the least, number 5. Online teaching is more effective than face-to-face teaching. Here are the choices. Letter A, face-to-face. Letter B, teaching. Letter C, online teaching. Letter D, more effective. I repeat, online teaching is more effective than face-to-face teaching. Letter A, face-to-face. Letter B, teaching. C, online teaching. D, more effective. What is the answer? Very good. The answer is letter D, more effective. If you got all the correct answers, students, good job. And for those who did not, it's okay. You can still make up for our next activities. Did you understand? Now, what have you noticed on your initial activity? Aren't the correct answers showing biases to the subject of statement? They are actually what we call the author's biases. So our lesson for this hour is all about examining biases for or against made by the author. This time, let's discuss examining biases for or against made by the author. And here are the lesson's objectives. First objective, identify example of bias. And the second objective, examine bias in various texts. We have only 2 objectives for this lesson. Now let's proceed to the definition of bias. What is bias? Bias in writing can be defined as a prejudice against something an author is writing about. What does prejudice mean? It is a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Next, favoritism for something an author is writing about. What does it mean? An author gives unfair, preferential treatment to a person or something at the expense of another. Next, an author's feelings or emotions cloud his or her objectivity with regards to something he or she is writing about. This will fall to an emotional bias. An emotional bias is a distortion in cognition and decision-making due to emotional factors. And last, an important skill of critical reading is the ability to detect an author's bias. The reason for this is to avoid invalidation of an author's claim. There you have it, students. Now let's proceed to the several ways to detect an author's possible biases. And here are the ways to detect an author's possible bias. Number 1, the author uses inflammatory language in the most extreme cases, racial epithets, slurs, etc. We have here an example. A prepaid card is definitely better than a postpaid SIM card. Do you still remember this example? This example is from your initial activity earlier. Am I right? And the word better in our example is considered bias. Why? Because using the word better is an insult to a postpaid SIM card. So it is an example of an inflammatory language. Next, number 2. The author consistently makes claims whose larger purpose is to elevate or demean one social, ethnic, national, religious, or gender group as compared to another or all others. Example: Kapampangans are known to be the most religious people in the country. In this example, the terms most religious are considered biased by other religious people because we have many religious people in the country, not only the Kapampangans. Am I right? Very good. Now, for number 3. The author consciously presents evidence that serves to tell only one side of an event or issue, purposefully withholding or ignoring information that may shed the opposing view in a more positive light. Example: online teaching is more effective than face-to-face teaching. In this example, bias occurs when the author used the terms more effective. It only shows one side of a story that led to inaccurate information. So that is for number 3. Now, the last but not the least, the number 4. The author's manufactures, falsifies, or dishonestly cites evidence in order to present his or her case in a more positive light. Example: eating fruits is the only way to live healthy. In this example, using only way is a biased word against other healthy food because we have many healthy foods. Am I right? Not only the fruits. So those are several ways to detect an author's possible biases. Students, always remember that bias is a subjective way of thinking that tells only one side of story, sometimes leading to inaccurate information or a false impression. When you research, it is crucial that you identify the level of bias in potential sources. Now let's move on to some possible sources of bias. Are you ready? These are some possible sources of bias. The writer relies on incomplete information. Next, the writer tries to deceive the reader. Next, the writer wants to believe what he or she is saying. Next, the writer's past experience influences his or her thinking. Next, the writer tries to persuade the reader. So those are some possible sources of bias. Now, take note, students. The authors show bias when they leave out information or alter facts to force the reader to have a certain opinion about a subject or to convince the reader to take a certain action. To identify bias in a passage or article, the reader must read through the material and ask, what does the writer want me to think or to do? Bias is often present in editorials, advertisements, religious, publications, and political materials. So we're done with the discussion, students. If you have questions regarding today's lessons, feel free to message me directly to my messenger, or you can comment via Facebook. I am more than happy to answer your questions and concerns. Now, is everything clear? Can you now examine biases made by the author? It's now time for you to prove yourself how good you are this afternoon. I will give you two types of activity that will test your understanding and if you can apply what you have learned from our discussion. Before we start, I want you to take down notes these main points of our discussion. Bias is any opinion that influences a person's thoughts, feelings, or actions. A person can be biased against something or have a bias for something. An author's bias is any opinion or prejudice that affects the author's writing and prevents the author from being completely neutral about the topic or issue about which she or he is writing. Always remember that, okay? Now, shall we start with your activities? I know you are ready, and I know you listened well to me earlier. Let's start? Okay, here is the first type of your activity. The directions: examine the given sentence and write B if the statement shows bias and NB if not. Again, examine the given sentence and write B if the statement shows bias and NB if not. I will repeat the sentence twice, so listen attentively. Number 1. Manny Pacquiao is the best Filipino philanthropist. What is the answer? Is it B or NB? Yes, very good. The answer is B, bias. Next, number 2. Henry C. Sr. was the only Chinese Filipino business magnate who offered justifiable salary to Filipino workers. Again, Henry C. Sr. was the only Chinese Filipino business magnate who offered justifiable salary to Filipino workers. What is the answer? That's great. The answer is B, bias. Next, number 3. All Asians look the same. I repeat, all Asians look the same. What is the answer? Good job. The answer is NB. Next, for number 4, women should only stay inside their homes and do all household chores. Again, women should only stay inside their homes and do all household chores. What is the answer? You got it. The answer is B. Number 5. The imposition of death penalty will help curb crimes and violence in the country. Again, the imposition of death penalty will help curb crimes and violence in the country. What is the answer? Very good. The answer is B. Now, you are done with your first type of your activity. Let's now proceed to the second type of your activity. Are you ready again? Okay, let's continue. Here it is. Here is the directions. Examine each of the following sentences, then draw a sad face if it shows bias and a smiling face if not. Do this in your answer sheet. Number 1, fruits and vegetables are both healthy, but eating fruits is healthier than eating vegetables. What is the answer? Very good. The answer is sad face. Number 2, the Philippines fails to handle COVID-19 cases effectively. That is why many people get infected by the virus. What is the answer? Excellent. The answer is also sad face. Number 3, all countries around the world are doing their best to stop the spread of the deadly virus. What is the answer? Good job. This time the answer is smiling face or happy face. Number 4, schooling is not a priority during this pandemic, so the government must consider the academic freeze immediately. I repeat, schooling is not a priority during this pandemic, so the government must consider the academic freeze immediately. What is the answer? That's great. The answer is sad face again. And last but not the least is number 5. Everyone is responsible for his or her own health. We should do our responsibilities for us to survive the pandemic. Again, everyone is responsible for his or her own health. We should do our responsibilities for us to survive the pandemic. What is the answer? Very good. The answer is a smiling face. If you answered all correctly, students, congratulations. Give yourselves 5 claps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If not, you can read your module for additional information and more understanding. Now that you know how to examine biases for or against made by the author, I guess you are ready for your final activity. Yes, you have your final activity. For your final activity, answer the 5-item exercise on the last page of your activity sheet. Be careful in applying what you've learned today. All right, I hope you have learned a lot from me today. This has been your teacher